All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Villain Driver podcast. I'm Elk, and along with me today we have.
Ashley.
I'm Emmy.
All right, and today we're going to be taking you through the last few episodes of Villain Driver Season 8, Best Cast Calling, picking up where we left off in the cast assessment with the F21 episode, and rolling on through the F16 episode that finished just yesterday. So when we started off the F21 episode with the endurance challenge, had the breathing in and breathing out challenge had been going on. And in this challenge, things kind of turned into a little bit of a disaster for two of our three tribes. So only one of our three tribes successfully finished the counting challenge the way it was intended to be completed, which resulted in a tiebreaker based on time for two tribes who received a score of 0, which was certainly not what anyone was completely expecting going in. But that went on to leave the Brooklyn 2.0 tribe going to tribal, consisting of Alex, Ava, Isk, Ginger, Logan, Sean, and Sushi. So what did we think of this challenge, first of all, the breathing in and breathing out challenge?
Considering I created it, I think it's a good challenge.
Like you mentioned, I was genuinely surprised with kind of how the challenge ended up. Just seeing the little troubles that were had there here and there with it, especially so early on a challenge, because it still felt very early in the org to have something that people would struggle with that much.
Yeah, it
I think it
seems like
was definitely surprising.
I was just gonna say it seems like these players don't like to practice or prepare for anything.
Oh no, definitely.
Oh,
They
well.
like to go in full throttle is definitely what I noticed. Like when they start the challenge is when they're preparing.
Mhm.
But we did have one of our tribes, and I don't remember which tribe it was, who seemed to practice the challenge like 3 times, but then they weren't sure if they were practicing or if it was the real one. And like even attempting to practice turned into a massive mess.
It's kind of funny though.
Oh yeah, like I'm not saying it's a bad thing or anything. Like it definitely made for quite an interesting episode.
Facts.
They still ended up losing.
True.
That's true. So with that, we end up having this tribal, and all in all, I think this was one of the quieter tribals that we had this season, where Sushi just ended up getting voted out 6-1. I don't think this was one of our more dramatic tribals. Sushi tried to get a little bit of a push onto Ava, but I don't really think Sushi had all that much traction here, unfortunately for Sushi.
Oh, is this the tribal council that we're talking about?
Yeah,
Okay, sorry, I just got back.
all good. Welcome back, Tristan.
Thanks.
But yeah, so we're talking about the tribal where Sushi ends up going out in a 6-1 vote, with that one vote landing on Ava.
Very uneventful tribal, yeah.
Yeah, sushi just like was not very social and it was just Sushi's time, like Sushi managed to skate by like somehow and death was calling. and it was about time.
I could
Alright,
see
well,
it just because this so far it seems like people have kind of gone for more active people up until this point, which is weird to see early on too.
so from there, after that early demise for Sushi, we rolled right into two tribes of 10, where we had a double tribal episode. So each tribe competed for individual immunity, a la the Palau twist, where both tribes compete for individual immunity, and both tribes would go on to vote someone off. And the challenge that they played in here was categories. And we had quite a few interesting things happen in this categories challenge, not least of which being they successfully managed to not clash at all on cities that started with H. Um, Finding some very creative attempts in some of the other categories, like Jack submitting hope as a weapon, which is certainly an interesting metaphor, but that was something that we were not able to count as creative as of an answer as that was.
It's
But
the
when all was said and
greatest.
done, each tribe had one person with a perfect 10. So there were no tiebreaker situations or anything. And that was Zap for the Manhattan tribe and EA Sean for the Queens tribe. Ended up being the two people who were immune here as the tribes go to their respective tribal councils. Any other thoughts on this categories challenge itself?
I didn't really pay attention to it, so I can't add to anything, unfortunately.
A pretty straightforward challenge.
Yeah. One of the fun things was how many people decided to submit a G50. It was quite the popular answer on both tribes. But from there, we go into the pair of tribals. And first, we'll talk about the Queen tribal, because it was really clear at first where this tribal was going to go. This tribal was a little bit all over the place. Um, and so this was a tribal where there was at least a little bit of a push on Malachi for a while. And in addition to the Malachi push, there was also like several other moves. The vote moved around a bit before finally starting to land on Ricey.
Ricey.
Ricey. Um, and it was one of those where it really seemed for most of the day leading up to the tribal, like this vote could end up going like 4 or 5 different ways.
Well, no.
Did it though? I don't know. I kind of feel like it
Yeah.
was kind of obvious. It was like Ricey for like the last like the day of the tribal. It was pretty like set in stone. Like when it was first announced, there was like you said, like the kind of like the push for Malachi, and there was like a little bit of like um people considering voting Ava, but for like the longest while, it was kind of just like a big ass majority on Ricey because people thought that himself, Ava, and Peanut were like a tight trio, which wasn't necessarily true, but that's like the perception. So
It still feels like there was enough of people talking about what they wanted to happen. There was still quite a few people talking about what they wanted to happen instead of just going, "Oh, I'll do whatever everybody else is doing."
um, that's fair.
Yeah, but it seemed like what everyone wanted was Ricey gone. Because
Except for the
especially,
minority.
well, yeah, but especially because like Izzy, like Zap leaked to Izzy that Ricey had that idol, the friendship idol, and then Izzy leaked that to everyone else. And once that happened, it was set. Ricey had to go.
Yeah.
What? There was a time when it seemed like that majority was going to land on either Peanut or Ava instead of landing on Ricey, but it was the idol that really sort of sealed the fate of how that tribal was going to go. Like once information about that friendship idol leaked,
Who
that's
who all
when
did Ricey end up telling about that
Just
idol?
Ava and Zap. But Zap told Izzy through like their duo thing.
Yeah, which is not a surprise, but still. Gotta be careful who you tell things to.
Room.
Especially when that's Zap.
yeah, I think this was really a tribal where we got to see the amount of influence that like the Zap contingent collectively is having on this season. Like this was one of the tribals that Zap completely like had her fingers over despite not even being there for it, right? Being on the other tribe. Like that was seeing the amount of control Zap was able to exert just by what she said and what she didn't say, I think ended up making a huge difference in how it played out.
Well,
Oh
Zap
yeah, because
wouldn't have wanted Ricey gone.
true.
Zap was working with Ricey.
That is true, though I think Zap made some comments along the way about like if Ricey was going to go out, that would sort of force Alex closer into working with her and stuff like that. Like she definitely seemed to see at least some benefit in it, even if it wasn't like the only thing she ever would have wanted.
Yeah, she was like really close with Ava and Ricey. I know we haven't talked about Ava's boot yet, but like she was really close with them both at the start of the season. But when both of them got out, she didn't really like care all that much. So like she had already found like stronger allies, I guess, for her game at that point.
Now, the one person who did take it really hard, especially as the Queen's Tribal's votes are being read and Manhattan is waiting to see who gets voted out, was Ricey's partner, Alex, who just like was completely shocked to see his partner going out there. And to be fair, Alex has had a little bit of a paranoid streak this game so
A
far.
little bit.
But this tribal in particular really seemed to be one of the flints that sparked off this like paranoid flame that we've been watching grow in Alex's confessional, because all of a sudden it was just like, oh, my partner is gone. Oh crap.
Like
Um
it's like I'm watching Abe, man.
and inheriting the friendship idol actually almost seemed to make Alex more paranoid, because Alex didn't know that Ricey had the friendship idol before Ricey was voted out, which meant that Alex is like, wait, is everyone whose partner gets voted out getting one of these, or just the two people who are losing their partners at this tribal? Like, the idol paranoia that this sparked in Alex also goes on to be part of the story of like Alex's confessional devolving into paranoia over the course of the next episode.
Which, of course, was wild. Because in the past we've like had it where people can give their idol away. So I was kind of surprised the first reaction was just like, does everyone get one? But I guess we did say it was a twist heavy season.
That'd be kind of crazy though for like half the people in the game to get idols because their like duo got voted off.
Oh yeah.
But also contributing to that paranoia spiral, this is the time when Alex finds the cursed treasure idol, um, which was the countdown vlog post. And this idol has the interesting property that anytime you attend a tribal and are eligible to be voted for, but you don't play the idol will cast a vote against you. Now, this is certainly like a little bit of a mechanic that makes it more dangerous to hold on to your idol, a little bit scary to play it. But Alex was completely convinced that A, everyone would immediately peg a random vote for him as being because he was holding an idol, and B, that like this would completely sink his game because it would be bluntly obvious to everyone why he was getting the vote.
I did not think that was the case at all. I do not, because why would you immediately think that because someone got a vote, they had an idol?
Oh
I
yeah,
hadn't
like
Yeah.
heard of that idol before. Like, it was planned.
yeah, I don't think it's an especially common idol, and I don't think like seeing someone get a stray vote would make most org players jump to, oh my god, they must have an idol, and it's like the penalty for having the idol. Like, I think that Alex was definitely overthinking that part of it a little bit. Like, sure, the fact that there would be, 11 votes instead of 10 at the tribal might make some people suspicious about something, but like most people are going to jump to like someone threw a hinky vote and there was an extra vote or something like that,
Yeah.
right? Like, if you were at a 10-person tribal and you saw like a 6-4-1 vote or whatever it ended up
Someone's
being,
someone's just bound to be out of the loop with that many people. That's like what I would suspect.
or that like someone threw a vote in case there was an idol or like
Yeah.
something like that. Like,
Yeah.
and yeah, adding up to 11 votes instead of 10, sure. But there are lots of things that affect the vote count. Like, I, I definitely think this was classic case of Alex overthinking it.
Very
Oh,
true.
definitely. It's funny to see because I know in my own case I would probably get extremely paranoid too, and it's easy to be the person who said, "Well, that's obviously not what someone would assume first off," like the way I do with the idol. But it kind of just goes to show like there's so much paranoia within orgs, especially this one, that even the most out there like advantages you always have that worry like someone knows. And Alex is just one of those people you see it coming through with. Because did Alex tell anybody at that point?
No.
I think at some point over the course of that episode, Alex tells Zap in order to try to plan around.
I
Yeah,
think
but
the
at first
paranoia
he's
was
paranoid.
yeah, but I think the paranoia a lot of the paranoia we had already been seeing before that Alex told anyone.
Oh yeah, I think it was that the paranoia led him to tell Zap and be like, "Hey, I have this problem. What do we do about it?"
Which good for Zap getting all the info and being trustworthy, but still.
Yeah, this was a really, really wild tribal. And of course, Alex is also sitting on the sunset advantage, aka the dark tribal advantage, that's going to hide all of the parchments. And for a while, Alex is like wondering whether he should play the idol so that he doesn't get the vote against him. Wondering whether he should play the dark tribal to hide that there's a vote against him. Like, he goes through a lot of different permutations of what he could do with this vote, aside from just who they want the target to be.
Well, he definitely makes a choice this episode.
Yeah, this was one of the votes that, especially based on the things we said during our cast assessment, we really didn't see this coming, like, all the way this tribal was going to go. Which this was the ultimately a 6-4-1 vote, counting the one against Alex from the idol, where they decide to leave 4 people, including Logan, voting for Chip, while getting the other 6 votes onto Logan. And Zap comes up with this plan where they can use the Dark Tribal and not have to use the idol, which also gives Alex some plausible deniability about where his vote went, and leaves everyone a little bit distrustful about like where the majority on Logan came from. Mhm. Honestly, like when we came up with the idea to include the Dark Tribal in this season, this was about the highest level play we could have possibly imagined, if not higher than the highest level play we could have imagined for a Dark Tribal to be played. Like,
Oh, I
this
love
was
it.
using a Dark Tribal to its absolute maximum power level.
Which I think says a lot for really any, not just like the person who uses it, but any of the players involved. Like, that were in on this plan.
Exactly. And like Alex goes ahead and sort of seeds the waters ahead of time, telling a couple people like he feels bad voting for Chip. He's gonna throw his vote away, maybe put a vote on L or something. But like the Chip voters are at this point expecting something like an 8-1-1 tribal, where like Alex has thrown a vote onto L, and like Chip will be voting for someone, and the other 8 votes will all be on Chip. And like, sure, you never want someone you think you're voting with to throw their vote away, but they aren't too worried about it ahead of time because like sure, it's one person throwing a vote away because they feel bad. Like some org players are emotional, this happens. Like it didn't seem like the biggest deal at the time, but sowing those seeds ahead of time gave Alex so much room to play after the fact.
Because then it leaves them with the, well, what actually happened? And it's hard to say that it's out for them to say it's Alex's fault because they're aware of it too. It's like, well, we could have also talked to Alex into not, we could have tried harder to talk Alex into not, but nobody knew.
Exactly. And the initial assumption is that it was probably a 5-4-1, which like so they're assuming that Alex had thrown the vote on L and assuming that 5 people flipped. But even the actual Chip voters weren't completely sure at first who flipped. Like Chris and Lisa and Dis all weren't even sure if they could still trust each other because they didn't know how many Chip voters there were. They didn't know who had flipped. Like for those who watched BB20, it was almost like a Fessy who flipped situation where they're just scrambling around trying to do the investigative work of like adding up the numbers, figuring out. Eventually they sort of start to figure out what's going on, especially because Ginger Snap is the first one to own having been a Logan vote. And that sort of starts to put the pieces together a little bit. Like, okay, so if Ginger was a Logan vote, then like it's generally assumed that Zap was a Logan vote. And once you get those 2 pieces in place, the rest of it slowly starts to make sense. But even then, like Chris and Lisa and Disc weren't completely sure if they could all trust each other or if they were lying to each other, which was the amount of paranoia sparking that honestly Alex could only have dreamed of at the time he decided to play the sunset.
It really is like you said. That ends up being one of the best ways to play, and one of the best ways to play the advantage. And I think we've seen some very good advantage and idle plays here so far throughout this org, which kind of makes me happy. Like through this season, which kind of makes me happy that we've had such a heavy advantage season, but people haven't been afraid to not play, like haven't been too afraid to play what they have as well.
Exactly. Like this season, like with all the twists and the advantages that we've had, I don't think that any of them individually or even in combination have like broken the game or anything. Like I think we've actually had a fairly healthy game dynamic overall. But just the sheer creativity in some of these plays, like if we're gonna have a best use of an advantage play, like Alex playing the Dark Tribal advantage is probably going to be like one of the contenders at the end of the season for best use of an advantage.
Oh yeah.
which
And
is
it honestly just
wild.
makes me excited for what's left too. Because I'm
Like,
like, if
who
this happened, will there be something that happens that can stand up to that too? Like, will we get something better?
and who would have called it at the start of the season that a dark tribal advantage would be a contender for advantage play of the season? Like, I
I'll
think
be
one of the other
honest. I'll be honest. Just when we were looking at casting, I wouldn't have suspected one of the best plays to come from Alex. Not saying anything about Alex, but out of everyone we had seen, I would have not picked one of the best, really advantage plays like that to come from Alex. So it's a nice surprise too.
yeah, when we did our like our casting meeting stats, like we definitely had expected Alex to be more of a character than a player.
Yes.
Like watching the way that he's played has really been something to watch. Um, Also, I think it was EA Sean. I don't 100% remember anymore who it was who said that like a dark tribal seems like one of the least powerful advantages they can imagine. But I mean, that is what it looks like on the surface until it's played perfectly.
And I mean, I have seen tribals where the dark tribal really didn't do anything. Yeah, it covered stuff up, but it had no consequence in the long run. We're not even that far in, and we've already seen consequence to the dark tribal, which is really cool. And it makes me wonder how like people starting to figure out stuff, which we kind of see some too of people starting to figure out not exactly what has happened, but there has definitely been an effect. And it definitely has people thinking. It's not something like, oh, well, a dark tribal happened, but what was supposed to happen still happened, you know?
And this is like even one of the weaker versions of the dark tribal. Like there have been other places that have used a dark tribal where either the player of the dark tribal still gets to see all the parchments, or where it also hides advantage plays at that tribal, or think to like disguise an idol play, or things like that. But we didn't put any of that into this version of the dark tribal. It's just a straight up dark tribal. Um,
Which, if those are versions that have been like seen commonly before, I'm surprised nobody tried to lie about it either.
yeah, there- with as much chaos as in this season, there's definitely like room for people to lie about basically whatever they want to if they really want to try. Which brings us to the next challenge, which was our 10-word memoir. And this, again, this is a creativity challenge. And this was an unbelievably creative submission from who would be the Queen's 4.0 tribe. Specifically, I remember Ava being one of the driving forces for this idea. Um, Obviously, we have all the aftermath with Lisa being betrayed, with Peanut starting to scramble a little bit, with Ava starting to scramble a little bit. Like, we have definitely a lot of fallout from the tribal. We even have Lisa saying something along the lines of, you know, help with this challenge while my hands are still bloody from that mess of a tribal, or something to that effect. Um, but Ava comes up with a creative idea when they have to make the picture in the 10-word memoir to make the word spell out the acronym, like I killed him, describing this sort of story of a person who was like had to resort to violence to escape a terrible situation. And in just 10 words and like a bolded acronym unpacking this complete story, it was one of the cooler submissions I've seen and one of the most like restriction breeds creativity moments that I've seen, right? You always hear people say restriction breeds creativity. When you're put into a box of what you're allowed to do, right? When you squeeze the orange, what's inside is what will come out. And in this instance, they found a way to use that 10-word limit to use bolded acronym abbreviation in order to tell a more complete story than what the 10 words could do alone. And that was such an unbelievable way to like completely take control of this challenge. Like all the credit in the world to that move because that was something I didn't think we would see. Like how could you think we would see that?
Sorry, you had cut out there for me on like I think the last sentence of what you had said.
I was just saying, like, there was no way we could have imagined seeing what we'd go on to see in that challenge. That was such a creative approach to it that it was really shocking.
Yeah, I definitely agree. This, I think, when we had casted, we did end up casting a lot of characters because we had a lot of characters that applied. A lot of the characters we casted largely had like a lot of creativity that we saw coming through. That's I think why we pegged them as characters. So it's nice to see the more creative take on a lot of this stuff as well. I like it. I just like the people people have really surprised us for sure. Um and I like to continue to be surprised, just not the fact that it wasn't what I expected or what was expected to happen, but just who when you have those moments of who thinks of that, it's just a really cool moment in general. I don't know. I
Oh,
just like seeing orgs. I like watching orgs. And so
it's like the creativity this season, like as a whole, like we look at right, you've got like Logan's confessionals, you've got what Ava did in the 10-word memoir, we've got just all of these moments throughout the season where the individuality and the creativity of our contestants has really been shining through in like a splendid and resplendid way.
which I love. I wish Logan was still here because of the confessional.
No, exactly.
Yeah, it's 100%. Because just the I get the spam and confessional thing at first. I didn't at first, but seeing the here is my full synopsis, it makes me want to do that more because I have done that in Orange where I've had like my here's my synopsis, maybe not quite in the same way Logan does. And then here's my chain of thought. To have that separation seems very cool and I like it. It's like reading a letter almost.
The only thing that I've ever seen anywhere close to what we saw in Logan's confessional was like the whole thing with Jet Skylark in would that be season 5, where he told the entire season as the story of one of our then hosts, Brian, like gradually turning the voted out castaways to crystal and the remaining like contestants fighting for the magic spell to change them back to human. And it was like narrated as this wild dramatic action adventure over the course of the season. Um, which was one of the most creative confessionals we've ever had. And honestly, I think that like Jets and Logan's stand alone above like pretty much every other confessional we've had in terms of creativity. Like there have been
Oh,
other excellent confessionals over the years, but those two, in terms of just like a piece of concept art, like stand alone.
this is where the difference of having a good confessional and having a unique confessional comes in. It's like you said, we've never seen anything like Jet or Logan's confessionals. But that's not to say we haven't had amazing confessionalists. Like Roman's always been known for having these really good confessionals. But it's not that same way, too. It's not something that I'm like, you could not believe this person's confessionals. They just really do something very unique.
Whereas someone like Jason from season 3 just had an extremely entertaining confessional. It was a, fairly normal style of confessional, but it was just written in a super entertaining way. So like we've had our handful of other great confessionalists over the seasons for another of our famous examples.
Oh, for sure. And I don't even think like I'd say like Wow Logan is definitely one of the coolest confessional and definitely the coolest this season. It's not like anyone else is a bad confessionalist because we have some other very good confessionalists this season as well, I feel like.
No, exactly. Like we have a true joy in the confessional section. Like we've got like Alex, Tig, Zap, Sean, Peanut, Chris, like just for a handful of names off the top of my head who have been having like really, really great confessionals this season.
And it's great because we not only get to see what's happening, which one of the confessionals, one of the biggest things for what is happening, I feel like we get to see more of the personality of the players that we haven't been able to see in the past because people would tell us what's happening, but we didn't see their personality come through the same way in the confessional that we do this season.
I think that's one of the reasons that this is like honestly one of our strongest casts. Like it's still a little early to say that this is going to be our best season, but like I'm not going to rule it out at this point that this is on its way to being the best cast and the best season that we've ever had.
Oh, 100%. And a lot of it is like you can make the argument it's not even been a predictable season, but you can make the argument that a lot of the right things happened at the right time. And some people may find that boring, but I don't think that's boring by far because in that moment, when the things are happening, it's been very entertaining to watch. I do think we've gotten off topic a little bit though from where we were with the recaps.
Well, the conversations do need to wander a little from their jumping off points at times, but yes, moving back to our final 18 triangle. Now, you just look at the boot list and see that Saggy went out here, and you remember what we said last time about like Saggy's antics during the Double Dog Jigsaw performance, or sorry, during the Double Dog Jigsaw challenge, like drastically sinking his game. You would say that this was like a super open and shut case. And maybe from the mile in the sky bird's eye view, this looks like an open and shut Saggy tribal. But on the ground, in the reality, as it played out, it didn't seem like it was quite as open and shut as the boot list would lead you to believe. Like, there was a whole thing where Saggy was trying to get an alliance going with Zap, and they were like at varying degrees of how seriously to take the alliance, sort of wavering back and forth. They were both distrustful of each other, but also both at least a little bit willing to consider working together. Um, it ends up being like weird, uh, a really weird tribal round as it plays out. Now the contingent consisting of Sean, Alec, Kip, Izzy, and Zap will go on to vote out Saggy with a majority 5. I think there was at least a chance that that majority ends up targeting someone else that round, possibly Lisa, if things play out a little bit differently. Um, I don't think it would have been easy for someone to flip it on Zap, but I do think it would have been possible for like Saggy to ingratiate himself a little bit with that 5 and get the target onto someone else outside the 5. Um, but yeah, so the other interesting thing about this tribal was that Zap was actually concerned about the possibility of like a saggy idol or something. And so Zap actually threw a vote onto Lisa here. And then Alex's treasure idol was also voting for him here. So the vote first comes up and we get like 1 vote Lisa. Lisa starts thinking, good game, everyone. I'm done. The Alex vote comes up. Nobody knows what's going on except Alex and Zap. the Zap vote comes up, the Saggy vote comes up. We have 4 different votes revealed at this point. 1-1-1-1. Like, this is looking like a very confusing tribal to everyone who's at it, even if it ends up being like a relatively straightforward tribal. With Saggy and Lisa being the 2 Zap votes. Zap voting Lisa, and then the other 5 voting for Saggy, with the idol voting for Alex. But
Oh,
that
I
was. Oh, go ahead.
love the chaos that Idol has caused. Just because when one person throws a vote, all of a sudden you have 3 people with votes, basically. Unless you just happen to put it on Alex, like, and jumping ahead a little bit, I guess, to where it has been used, it's also been timed where it's not like it's something that, oh, people just expect because it happened for so long either. Like, it was good timing of when everything happened where it's not like everybody's figured out exactly what's happening either.
Yeah, and like there was nothing even after Alex plays the idol that's going to immediately indicate the people left in the game that that's why Alex was getting the votes. So like
Exactly.
the hunt for who voted Alex, a la Lex from the actual season 3 Africa, who voted for me, or Rupert from season 7 Pearl Islands, who voted for me, you know,
Yeah.
the the paranoia and the witch hunt of who was the Alex vote, like, actually goes on to play a little bit of the role in the social dynamics here.
Oh yeah. And just with the it's also just set this trend of things aren't always easy vote. It has not been always it's not always going to be completely unanimous. Like, I like that even from right there, we have people with 3 votes on them. Like, it is not a one person or the other to everybody's eyes. Like you said, a couple people know. But it definitely leads to that confusing where at first it could have just been like Lisa saying, "Oh, someone threw a vote on me," but now a couple people have a vote thrown on them. It makes things a little more like, "Oh, it's not just one person out of the loop. There's some people who would definitely have other ideas of what's going on," is what it makes it seem like more instead of just one random vote. And leads way to a lot more tension happening, which I love.
Yeah. So then we get Final 17 merge, or at least that's what we're going to call it for right now.
Yes.
Um, which goes on to be like quite a strange set of circumstances, because right, we have this greed challenge where the 17 people are set in a circle. Lots of different people are going to talk about the possibility of taking greed here. But the way that this works, for those who didn't see the actual challenge, is that we've numbered the contestants from 1 to 17. 9 people will attend tribal. The person who claims greed is safe but attends tribal, along with the 8 people after them in the sequence, and it wraps around. So if you're number 13 and you claim greed, you are immune and attending tribal, along with 14, 15, 16, 17, 1, 2, 3.
I
Um,
forget, did we explain that, like, 2 contestants, that's how it was going?
yes, there were lots of questions about it, because it's a somewhat confusing way to run greed, but
Oh, for
we
sure.
explained it quite a few times over, because it's, usually greed is run as a tribal challenge. So running it here as this merge challenge where only some of the people are attending the tribal, like, made for an interesting dynamic. One of the funniest parts of this grade challenge is the part where Zap, Tig, and L land for L to claim greed, or at least we're talking about the possibility. This would have resulted in a tribal where L was immune, and Chris, Ginger, Ava, Izzy, Jack, Tig, and the 2 Shawns would have been at the tribal. Um, And this was like a tribal that they were okay with going to because they would have had a clear majority in that tribal. But that did not end up happening because Elle was not awake when Greed opened. And uh Zap and Tig are spending like the 30 minutes leading up to the opening of Greed, like frantically trying to get a hold of Elle. Meanwhile, when Greed actually opens, other people like Peanut, Ava, um, people who've been on the outside of recent votes are at least considering taking it. Malachi thinks about taking it, but doesn't want to be putting Lisa at risk and like holds off for the sake of not putting Lisa in a tribal where she's at risk here. But ultimately, the instant the greed opens, despite it taking a solid 3 or 4 tries, Lisa is the first one to successfully enter the command and claim greed. And Lisa makes a sentence
Went
that
back
will
and
sort
looked
of
at that and kind of laughed because I was like, did really nobody? And I get they planned it and talked about it because I saw some of the talking, but I was in and out too. I laughed when I looked back and saw the attempts.
yeah, they just decided to let her have it. Like they saw she was going for it and they said, fine, like take your greed and live with the consequences.
I think most people had already talked through the situations because wasn't it someone actually told Lisa, like Lisa was partially told to take greed pretty much.
Yeah, Lisa didn't want like Zap to take greed, for example, which would put Lisa vulnerable at tribal. Zap didn't really want to take greed there. Zap wanted Elle to take it instead. But like Zap at least considered it, but didn't super feel confident about the way that tribal would play out just with how the numbers lined up. Um, there are so many different scenarios we could have had for how that tribal lined up. As it was, as we said, Lisa ends up taking it, saying the, shall we call them, jinxing it words of, hey, it looks like I'll finally get one of my targets out. I mean, to say that in a public chat is definitely some definition of tempting fate.
Wild, yeah.
Like saying publicly, I took greed because I'll finally get one of my targets out is not a great way to like to tempt fate. Right?
Oh, no,
Like,
that is how you don't get your target out of spite.
yeah. And even though I don't think actually saying it came back to haunt Lisa, I think that things went the way they did for other reasons besides the fact that Lisa said it. Like it's just
We're
the sort of
still
thing that
close enough that can come back to haunt her though. And I think that is I wouldn't put it past some people that still being on their minds.
um but yeah, it's like it was just wild. But if, so this rival plays out with Lisa Gold, this L Chris Ginger, Ava, Izzy, and Jack being the pool of voters, with of course Lisa having the immunity due to taking. And this was a very interesting tribal. Um, again, this could have gone several ways. I think there was a world where this could have been the opportunity to blindside a a big threat like L, for example. Um, or I believe Lisa's intended target here was Ginger. And I think there was like a very real chance of Ginger going out here. There was even a chance of Izzy going out here, but Izzy played this fantastically. Like Izzy just managed to get in the right ears at the right times, and specifically to the point where although Lisa was interested in weakening Zap, Lisa was not willing to lose Izzy to weaken Zap. And that was a huge, like, significant hinge in the relationship structure of this episode. The fact that Lisa wanted to get out an ally of Zap's, but was not willing for that ally to be Izzy.
Which it just makes me wonder, does Lisa realize how close they are? Like, exactly how close they are? Because I can't see any situation where Izzy would, like, choose Lisa over Zap. Not at this point in the game.
And like I do think that we do think that Izzy is someone who could potentially, under the right circumstances, be a connection um for Lisa. Like obviously right now as the alliances are in this game, there is not really a path for them to work together. But there's like a world where that connection could end up mattering. Either where Izzy keeps Lisa from being that side's target for a little bit longer, or vice versa. If Zap herself gets blindsided, especially if it's like on a tribe that Lisa's not on, that paves the way for Lisa to get in with like whatever power structure replaces the Zap and Friends power structure. Because right now Zap is like so visibly the center of the entire power structure of this game that there will be like this massive power vacuum whenever Zap goes out. And that relationship could end up being key in the way it restructures afterwards. And that's not to say that no one else in this game has influence or anything like that. It's just that Zap
Like,
is like the gravity well of attention, the nexus through which all other connections flow. That like Zap is effectively right. If this season is based on New York City and its subways, Zap is Grand Central Station.
And if Grand Central Station's cut off, you have to find another way around. And Lisa's hoping she can grab onto that route with Izzy, it sounds like, then possibly. I mean, you don't want to cut off potential things, and Izzy is a good player. Now, there's a danger with working with good players, but it can also help you too. You want to be on the stronger side, and for Lisa, Izzy could even potentially be a shield if they do end up going further together if something happened to Zap. Like, I can see where she sees a lot of potential there with Izzy for sure.
Now, due to real life situations coming up, Lisa ends up not being able to be present for the last couple hours leading up to tribal and self voting. Even before Lisa got called away, the dynamics of the vote had sort of shifted without Lisa's knowledge to the point where Ava had become the main target. And like they had decided to blindside Lisa and take out Ava over the course of the day. It would be a unanimous vote, not counting Lisa's nullified self vote, where we have 7 votes for Ava and then Ava's 1 vote for L. That would have been 2 if Lisa had voted. Um, and ultimately, like this tribal really cements that like this power structure centered around Zap, Izzy, Tig, L is firmly in control of this game. Like this power structure has so many roots all over the place that it's starting to become really, really hard for anyone to put up like a strong resistance against it, especially because it's hard to precisely define the boundaries of who's in and out of that power structure for anyone else on the season. It was sad to lose Ava like this. Like, I do think Ava ended up bringing a lot to the season, and I say this as someone who had been a little bit skeptical of Ava before the season, though eventually got brought around and was very thrilled to have Ava on the cast. And then as the season actually played out, Ava proved that it was right to cast her. Like, just very, very completely proved that she belonged in this cast. She was an above average both player and character on this season, despite the fact that things ended up not going her way. I'm not saying something on a cast as stacked as this cast is.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think I was with you. I think I actually argued against was it I think I argued against Ava being on the season in favor of someone else. Who I think they both did end up on the season. I can't remember off the top of my head. But no, this is one of those moments where I'm glad to be proven wrong. Like, there's a reason we all end up talking about this stuff anyways when we're casting together. And sometimes you hit the mark and sometimes you don't. That's one of those instances where I am 100% glad to be proven wrong on that. Was it Ava? I remember there was a discussion where we were back and forth between two people, and I think it was Ava and someone else.
Ava was in one of the later pools of people that we added to the cast. And yeah, we got to a point where there were 4 slots left and 9 or so people who were up for consideration for those 4 slots, and Ava ended up being one of those 4 that we chose. And I had come into the casting meeting relatively low on Ava, probably lowest out of the people who were in the casting meeting. But after a couple of the other people at the casting meeting pitched the case for Ava based on what they saw in the interview, I was relatively early to be convinced. I hadn't seen it the first time I read through her interview, but I was open to being convinced once other people pointed out what they saw and what they hoped for with Ava. And yeah, I'm glad that we were convinced to put Ava on, because I do think that she definitely brought a lot to this season.
Yeah, Ava's I was looking back at it. Ava is one of the people after listening to people had flipped and decided on them instead of the other person. And I believe the other person ended up on the cast too, so it's really cool to see the sometimes all you need is a chance, even if it's people can be skeptical, you just need that chance to prove yourself. And I really think Ava has done well on this cast, and I'm glad she ended up on it.
From there, moving on from Ava's downfall, for lack of a better word, we move on to the final 16, where we have our Superheroes Clash Challenge. This was a wild challenge. This is probably one of the more involved and complex challenges we've ever run in the history of Villainviver. I can't really think of anything off the top of my head, aside from a final immunity challenge, that is anywhere near as complex as this one. There's probably a few here and there, but not many that have a complexity level comparable to this challenge.
When we were sitting in the call, actually planning this challenge, because Ashley was like, I want something almost D&D style with superpowers for this. And there was some talk of dice being involved too, but I think and a few people pointed it out. There probably was that Pokemon lover influence in me that kind of contributed to this. When we were trying to think of how to lay it out, it definitely was a combination of people coming up with the ideas for powers, but I was just very much like, guys, I have this idea. Please let me let me go with it. Believe in me. And I'm really happy with how it turned out too. Because a lot of us came together for the powers themselves.
I feel like this worked out well, not having dice in that it played out almost like a board game or a living card game with like some D&D and Pokemon influences certainly as well. But having like perfect knowledge of what options you have, having that double blind reveal, like double blind submission with simultaneous reveal mechanic ends up being like the core to what happens here. And I think that if we had made dice a factor or some sort of randomness or RNG a factor, it would almost feel less satisfying, right? It would feel like this was a game that came down to the dice rather than a game about outplaying, out bluffing, out thinking, out planning your opponents. Like
Yeah.
both players have the list of the options that are available, or both teams, I should say, have the list of the options that are available to them. And it's just a bluffing game and a what can you do with the options you have in front of you game. Like it's part bluffing, part optimization that made for a really interesting puzzle because the different powers like counterpicked and counterbalanced each other in different ways. There were synergies that required specific powers to be used after each other. Um, all in all, like it had a satisfying amount of design complexity to it in a way that like ultimately
It worked well. Like I was, and I think a live challenge was the perfect way to do with it. Which thanks for the patience of for people and Roman's help of letting me type it out and Roman telling me, okay, this tribe did this. We were sitting in host chat and Roman was sitting here like, okay, this tribe locked in on this. Which made it easier to type up. But it worked very well for a live challenge as well. That in the way it was like narrated. And in general, it was just fun to watch. I know that I had a big that like as the host, we had a big hand in creating it, but it was fun to go like be yelling in the background. Why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing this? Which I can see Jack in the audience right now, and I have to admit it was definitely a lot of times I was sitting there yelling, "Why are they so scared to attack? If they just used electricity, they could turn this around in a heartbeat with water and electricity."
yeah, it became like a game. I think one of the phrases we said at one point in host chat where like playing not to lose instead of playing to win is just playing to lose more slowly. And the defensive play style of the Bronx tribe ended up just not really working out, whereas the Brooklyn tribe treated it much more as like a strict optimization game. And like, sure, there was opportunity for defenses and counterplays, but the defenses needed to advance your game plan or to block portions of the opponent's game plan rather than just like being spammed on cooldown. And I think ultimately that's like what caught up to the Bronx tribe and why they ended up losing is that they weren't proactively advancing their game plan. They were just sitting back and trying to like delay the opponent's game plan. And I think that they got to a position where they needed to play proactively instead of reactively. And they were just like so aware of the fact the challenge was slipping away from them and so caught up in like the visions of their own defeat that they missed the opportunity to like try to take that risk and flip things around.
Oh yeah. And there's definitely a point where they there you do have your point to defend. When you are both playing water at the same time, it can be that better bet to defend right after to keep from being frozen and take that damage off of you. But I think where I really started yelling was about round 5. It was like, okay, the Bronx was turned to water out of sync. Um, no, and it was like, yeah, okay, I see where it's going. It's out of sync where they had just played the turn to water. I was like, oh, okay, they can maybe 6 or 7, somewhere in there. They had it out of sync where they weren't playing the water at the same time, and I was just like, if Bronk's tribe could play water at not the same time as the other tribe, they could use the electricity to do that extra 10 damage. And when they had the storm raging, that's what it was. They used sandstorm when I was yelling at them to use water. And I was like, why don't they use electricity? That's 10 damage right there. So but that's something I really like. Even when we had been planning it, I didn't realize how much damage that could do until we saw it play tested. And I'll be honest, in playtesting, fire did 8 damage, so electricity did not feel that great. And it just ended up with being fireball. Like the fire was too powerful, so that did get scaled back after playtesting.
Yeah, in the playtest version, it almost looked like that one infamous video of the LARP where the guy's just standing there saying fireball, fireball, fireball.
Yeah, that really is what ended up being, and that's why the fireball got scaled back too, because I was like, it should not be doing this much damage and get rid of a plant if someone has it.
I don't think either tribe ended up going with the plan.
No, and then that didn't happen in playtesting either, which I was kind of sad about because I was like, I want to see that. That is when you would see the long game really start to come out. If somebody had healing with invisibility, that would be wild. Although I think pretty much every team that has like played this, even played tested, took fire. So what can you do? Maybe it wouldn't have been that. One thing that we saw in playtesting that we didn't get to see like in the challenge is Mind Replicant, which was completely different in playtesting. And I don't think I ever revealed at the end of it what Mind Replicant was. So Mind Replicant let you be able to do 2 other attacks that same turn. So you could use 2 people at once. Basically, you could use your water, do your water damage and your ice person and freeze in the same turn. So Mind Replicant was really like a super strong move, but it could only be used every 5 turns. So it kind of counteracted like Sandstorm. You do end up doing about similar amounts of damage, and you have that like 5-turn gap of when you can use it.
That 5-turn gap and that timing like really sets up for a very interesting dynamic with invisibility baiting then. Because if you invisibility on a mind replicant turn, like all of a sudden you've gained a huge advantage. But then what happens if they wait for the 6th turn to try to use the mind replicant to bait out the invisibility on the 5th so they can use it on the 6th? When do you deploy the invisibility? Like you're checking invisibility cooldowns against mind replicant cooldowns. Like it actually adds to almost a proverbial game of chicken, where it's like who's gonna faint first using their mind replicant or using their invisibility and leave, if you use the mind replicant while invisibility is up off cooldown, you can get completely blown out. But vice versa, if you don't play the invisibility, you could get mind replicanted, water and electric in the same turn or water and ice in the same turn. But if you do play the invisibility and they didn't mind replicant, well, now you're just like wide open to get giga blasted the following turn. Like it's this huge dynamic of cooldown management. And again, adding that extra layer of bluffing that like is super intense and super fascinating.
Oh, for sure. And then another thing with that Mind Replicant, if you use Mind Replicant and they used invisibility, you essentially just use 3 of your powers, so all of a sudden it is very obvious which power comes next too. And that just leads to you just did a lot of damage, but all of a sudden, boom, they know exactly what your next move is. Because you only have four different powers there.
Wait, so did the mind replicant power count as a cooldown turn for the 2 powers that it used then?
If you used Mind Replicant, you could choose 2 people that same turn. Now, in playtesting, it would be for the next turn.
Okay,
And
no,
the reason that was changed is because you and it was seen in playtesting. You really were kind of giving up a turn just to be able to use two at the same time the next turn. And then have it be obvious which move was going to be used the third turn. Like it left
so
a wide range and took out some of that unpredictability.
yeah, exactly. So
And
with
so
that
I
said,
am glad that I'd made that change, but I really wanted to see it in action.
oh yeah, no, it was one of the more interesting powers to see in action, though. Of course, like the Sandstorm power ended up like providing some interesting gameplay too, and it was a forced choice between Sandstorm and Mind Replicant the way it was set up. So from there we go to a tribal, and this is going to be a very pivotal tribal. So the people attending this tribal are Alex, Tina, Sean, Dis, Lisa, Jack, Malachi, and Chris. And this is such an interesting tribal because, again, the dynamics of this vote as it's building up, as it's being planned, are super, super complex. Like, it's not at all obvious which way this is going to.
And I was kind of surprised at the way I was surprised and not surprised at the way it did go because we could see the setup of it. But I remember the whole time we were watching this setup, we were like, is this happening? Are we gonna see this many idols being played? Hello. I think we had some trouble there. It looks like Elk was having trouble as well and left for a second, but he should be right back. Elk had cut in out on my end. I don't know if he cut out on anyone else's. And I thought it was me for a second. But yeah, basically with this challenge, or not challenge, this tribal, we did end up seeing a bit of contemplating, going back and forth about who exactly it would land on, and I do believe Alex kind of became more of a quicker consensus than I was expecting at first. Um, but really, in the end, we had seen this setup of I had missed where Alex was also going to use the friendship idol because I believe that was a later play, but being this double idol play here, it is another instance where you do see Alex could be like honestly a really good contender towards the end because of the advantages we have seen from it. But you watch Alex say the same thing once he gets back. I think his connection may have cut out altogether. Yee. But Out of this curiosity, we may have Elk say more too when he comes back. Is there. Oh, I was going to ask Jack if he had any questions. Hi, yes, Elk just did like his connection just cut out, I think. Mine cut out and then I came back and his cut out like when I had gotten back. Elk. There
Are
you are.
you able to hear me again?
Yes, I
My
can hear
internet
you.
cut out for just a
I
second. What
don't
was
know.
the last thing that you heard me say?
I didn't know if you had cut out completely or I did, but you were just starting to talk about the challenge.
About the
Not the
tribal, you
challenge,
mean?
the tribal. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were just
So
starting
the
with the tribal.
so the anti-zap contingent here is looking at Alex as a viable target, right, to try to weaken Zap's position in the game, especially after a swap that like exposes something of Zap's power structure in the game. And leaves Alex isolated in part due to having picked Peanut, who then didn't pick according to like getting a majority on that tribe for the Zap contingent, because Peanut hasn't been super tight with the Zap contingent up to this point. But it's really interesting the way this plays out because basically what we're going to see is that like Peanut is going to appear to be the backup target here for the side that's trying to take a shot at Alex. And I'm not entirely sure that that makes sense for their game. Now, I'm not sure necessarily who the right target would have been, but I almost feel like potentially someone like a Dawn might have been a target that makes more sense if you're trying to weaken Zap's game than Peanut. Um, like I'm not entirely sure that this is the right move, but this is also a tribe where not that many people are like targets that would actually help weaken Zap's game to take out.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in general, it would be hard to know that Sean is a right move too as well. It wasn't extremely obvious about what would be the best move for who.
No, exactly. So yeah, so it becomes clear that Alex is likely to have an idol here, almost certainly going to be playing it. So the backup target becomes super important. Then all of a sudden, right, Alex goes up to Peanut here and says, "Look, I have a second idol, and I'm gonna play it for you. Like we together can vote anyone out of this game that we want to." And they end up deciding to settle on Jack here. And like obviously this is a little bit of video with the devil for Peanut. Like Peanut does not want to vote Jack. When Peanut realizes like, hey, I could be a backup target here and I'm getting an idol played on me if I do it, like Peanut is self-interested. Like he's 100% taking that deal.
Which I was saying a little bit while you had gone. I think this sets up Alex in an amazing spot in the game as having Peanut as someone now more than ever with that. But also, just looking, if FTC is a ways away, Alex already has an amazing argument, and I would love to see what happens further. It does become a question if Alex would get there eventually because of how much has happened. Which this is the first bigger thing we've seen where that people would actually start to contribute to Alex.
So Alex's idol for himself ends up canceling 5 votes. The idol played on Peanut does not end up canceling any votes. Chris is left out of the loop voting Malachi. In what was like a potentially protecting against an idol vote. Like it wasn't a fully left out of the loop. And then there are the 2 votes on Jack from Peanut and Alex, which by themselves like go on to form a 2-1 majority because all of the other votes got canceled. And that was just such a like really wild tribal, right? Watching everyone there as the results come in. We lose yet another of our big pre-merge characters this season, like three tribals in a row, really. Four tribals in a row, really. We've lost huge characters, right? Like Logan, Saggy, Ava, Jack. Like those are some huge characters to be losing one after the other in the pre-merge. Yet we
Oh,
still
for
have
sure.
like so many big characters in this season.
It's crazy to think that this has been pre-merge.
Now, granted, this is a pretty long pre-merge. Like this is a 24-person cast. Like we're at final 15 now. Like
What?
this is one of the longer pre-merges we've had. Now, granted, season 3 started with 24 contestants and did not merge until final 11. So they don't
Which
know
I
yet
guess kind of
exactly when they're
becomes the
gonna
giveaway.
merge.
And I guess with the bigger cast it kind of becomes the giveaway that we are not going to have it merge super late. So sorry, super early. So it was kind of funny to see people like suspect that this was a fake merge earlier when we did do the fake out merge.
Yeah.
I think my exact reaction was imagine how people who don't play a lot of Survivor orgs are reacting to this. And I think my first reaction thought was, or I think Ashley's first thought was like, what about Chip?
Yeah. No, that was a moment. Like there were people who were like celebrating that it was a merge. There were people panicking that it was a merge. Like we ran the gamut of reactions back and forth because and of course people who were like skeptical but happy and skeptical but annoyed. Like we just had every conceivable reaction to this fake merge twist. Um, but now we are coming up on like who knows when the merge is here, right? Whether it's going to be final 13, final 12, final 11, like it was in season 3, right? They don't know yet. They're starting to plan for several different merge possibilities.
Even I don't know yet because I haven't looked at the spreadsheet in a while.
But that's part of the fun and the excitement is that like no one really completely knows exactly how it's going to play out here. Um,
For sure.
and I'm really looking forward to where this cast takes things from here. As we speak right now, we're playing out a Gartic Zone challenge at Final 15, which results will go through in about a day from now. A little less than a day now because we're recording late in the evening. And after this challenge, we'll be at the Final 14 with, yet another swap, given the whole swap-againza twist that we are enacting on the players this season. But with that, I think it's time that we've gotten through the recaps and move on to our closing segments. So since there's just two of us here at this moment, I will just go back and forth with our picks for the couple of categories that we have right here. So first up, who is your current pick to win the season? Who do you think is playing what will eventually become the winning game right now?
If Alex can hit merge, I will say Alex. If not that, I really do think Izzy or Elle have some good shots in here.
So that's interesting. I like the picks that you have there. I'm gonna go from a similar reason, but I'm actually gonna go with Tig here. I think that Izzy and Mel and Alex are all just a little bit too visible and a little bit too much of a threat level at this point that like they're eventually going to get cut, and it's going to be who stands in position to inherit the aftermath. And I think that Tig is playing like a really, really strong game without being as visible as his immediate allies, so that when they eventually like lose some power, he'll be in a better position to survive it and trailblaze forward.
I guess I think just some of my concern with that, because I do think Tig is in a good position, is about how much backup Tig would necessarily have versus it, like, if they got on the wrong, like, if Tig got on the wrong side of someone, you know?
Yeah, no, I definitely think there's like plenty of ways that that could happen too. Moving on, we'll do our character appreciation segment. Who is a character left in this game who you're really appreciating what they're bringing to the season right now?
I think in the same way like Tig is kind of your winner pig, I really appreciate what Tig is brought to the season and what Alex has brought to the season. I think Alex just because of the surprise they've been. And Tig was someone I didn't know a lot about. I'm pretty sure it was Ashley who was it Ashley who was like really like, let's see Tig on this season? I think it was. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, the argument was Tig will be so entertaining. And I've not really been disappointed either. The confessionals, just something about the personality of Tig I like a lot.
No, I completely get that, and I agree that Tig has just been like a really fantastic character to watch on this season. Um, for my character appreciation this week, I'm gonna go with Ginger. I think that Ginger has been playing like this very subtly snarky kind of role in confessionals, like always having lots of entertaining things to say about how the season's going. So I'm going to give my character appreciation segment this week to Ginger, who has just been like really bringing a lot of joy to the season.
I don't know if you've done this other or is Tristan there? I'm not sure if Tristan's still there. Anyways, I don't know if you've like done this at all. But have you done questions from the audience since we do have an audience member?
I've been checking for questions, but I haven't seen any questions pop in our spectator chat or trusted spec chat yet.
Quick, Jack, ask all the questions.
Um,
I tried.
yeah, no, it's fine. If we get questions in spec chat or trusted spec chat, I'll try to address them as well as we go. And our third traditional segment here is a segment we call the Dun Chain. The person who will not win this game, whether it's because they have no more chances to win a jury vote or because there's no viable path for them to make it to the end. Who is the one person you are most confident will not win this game?
Maybe it's because of last season, but I don't know. I think it was that at this point Zap would have to pull a Roman and somehow get to the end to win. And I can't see Zap getting to FTC. Now, also at the same time, I couldn't see Roman last season getting to FTC. So maybe Zap will pull a Roman there, but I know it's not that same game Roman's played or the same as strong as the game, but Zap is very much someone who is well liked, even with people against them.
I agree that Zap is a massive jury threat in this game, and therefore I think it's going to be very hard for Zap to make it to the end of this game because I too think that everyone is going to wake up and sees like just how much of a jury threat Zap is and not permit that to happen under any circumstances. For my dun chain this week, for similar reasons, I'm gonna go with L because I think that L's threat level has just really spiraled out of control by this point, and I don't think there's anything L can do to make himself less of a threat from this point on. Like I think his threat spiral has just gotten a little bit too far out of control, and I don't see him pulling it. I think he's playing a great game. I think his threat level management just has flown the coop for the last time. And like even if he tries to put the train back on the tracks, like it's too far gone.
Maybe it's me having just missed something, but what more do you think has raised L's threat level there?
I guess a lot of people seem to see L as like a big part of Zap's power structure in a way where some people are thinking of it as L's power structure. Like some of the people on the outs are trying to take the shots there. I think Pig has positioned himself to like inflate L's position in the game, like as a shield, and Tig will eventually like have to and be willing to take that shot. And combined with that, like we're just, you know, combined with things like that, I think we're just getting to a point where like L is seen as too much of a power broker in this game, too much of a social threat in this game, that I don't see L being able to make it to the end without getting that shot taken at him.
I'm
Like it might
honestly
not happen
surprised.
immediately, but I think it's gonna happen.
I kind of feel that way with Izzy, and I'm kind of surprised that's not more directed towards Izzy than it is L.
Izzy's managed to stay under the radar in terms of perception inside the game than L has. I think that Izzy is playing a fantastic game, arguably a better game than L in terms of actual influence on the game. But I think that other people in the game are more aware of L's influence than Izzy's influence.
I can definitely agree with that too. And that is one of the reasons why I throw Izzy in there as my if Alex doesn't make FTC person.
Yeah. And of course, half the fun at the end of the season is looking back and seeing just how wrong our picks in these segments were, both for the win and for the done chain, as people go on to surprise us. But that's part of the fun of a reality competition, is people can always do different things than you think they're going to.
Oh, exactly. Like I think I know it was from my first season, but I remember looking back on the podcast, and I think one of the concerns people had about me was they didn't like from season 3 was they weren't sure if I'd be able to hold up at an FTC. So it's always fun to see like what happens with those predictions too.
Yeah. I remember my first cast assessment of like the cast assessment of my first season here basically saying that like because I'd only played a couple of smaller things before this, that I was going to have like a massive case of stage fright and choke out early. And no, it's interesting because at the same time, like I can kind of see why like they thought the stage fright would get to me. I end up thinking that other things like, having loyalty to allies who are playing social games than I was ended up being more of my downfall than like an actual stage fright situation or anything. Um, that's one of the things is you can never predict perfectly what's going to happen ahead of time. But that's why it's so fun to predict things.
Oh yeah. Even when your whole thing is quote unquote reading the game, you can never be sure.
Yeah.
You can have as much confidence as you want in being sure, and that can come back to bite you in the butt. But even from outside the game, you can't see everything that happens. It's one of those things where, like, you can say you see the truth of what happened, but you really didn't because you just don't see what happens in those confessionals. You never see the whole picture and you never see what people feel. And sometimes it's what people feel is what it comes down to when it comes to who wins the game.
Exactly. All right. Well, we've had quite a interesting discussion today on our show. Any other closing thoughts before we stop the recording, or any more questions coming in from our listening audience?
Who's the cutest host? Quick, go.
I'm not in position to make that judgment.
Oh, darn. I tried. I think it's me.
All right. Well, with that said, we thank you all for joining us, whether you've been one of our listeners right here in the Discord channel, whether you're listening to us after the fact on the Villain Fiver YouTube page, whether it's some combination of the two that you popped in for a few minutes during the live recording, or listening to the rest after the fact. thank you for lending us your ears for these few brief moments while we talk about this excellent season that we've been having. If you want to be notified every time this podcast goes live, don't forget to pick up the podcast role in the React Roles channel of the Villain Viber Discord. With that said, I have been Elk, and along with me today we've had,
I'm Emmy.
and having previously been with us, but not currently on the recording at this time, we're Tristan and Ashley. So thank you very much one more time, and we'll see you next week with more coverage of this season.